Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for taking the time today to join this episode of Distance Learning. My name is Cory James, and I'm the brand ambassador for Montelobos and Ancho Reyes. And as you know, over the last few months, Campari and Campari Academy have partnered with Portland Cocktail Week on Tuesdays and Thursdays for distance learning with some amazingly talented individuals from all over the country, one of which I'm going to introduce to you momentarily. Now, today's distance learning course is sponsored by Montelobos. Born in Santiago Mazatlán, Oaxaca, created by Ivan Saldana in a full 50-50 partnership with our Maestro Mezcaleros, Montelobos is a sustainably cultivated mezcal using no herbicides or pesticides. Now, we believe there's a level of responsibility in mezcal production that we as mezcal producers have to uphold, ensuring the survival of these plants that have been on the earth for over 11 million years. You kind of have to treat the earth like a bank account. If you take one agave out, we need to put 3 back in. And much like the Montelobos ethos, we as members of the hospitality industry have a level of responsibility as well to curb the waste production and help the environment, ensuring our survival, which coincidentally happens to be the basis of today's discussion. So speaking of sustainable, our guest today is Amanda Thomas. She currently resides in New Orleans. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. Amanda started her career in the industry in the kitchen, which is why she takes such a strong culinary approach to her cocktail application. And she's become an expert in utilizing pretty much all things waste, repurposing them in cool and interesting ways. Now, if you have any questions for Amanda, please throw them into the Facebook Live thread. And for this particular module, I'm going to address them at the end. We have a lot of information to go through, so we just kind of want to stay on track. And then any questions you might have about Montelobos, please throw those in as well, and I'll address those at the end when Amanda is finished with her presentation. And also, please take a moment to follow us at Campari Community and at Montelobos, where you can see some cool things that our team is up to now and in the future. But without further ado, Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what we will be discussing today?
Yes, thank you, Cory. Thank you so much for having me today. Yes, my name is Amanda Thomas. I am currently the bar chef at Sobu here in New Orleans. And what we were going to go over today is basically, it's to start a conversation about what we're doing and why we do the things that we do. Behind the bar, at home, anything. Sustainability is something that has become very popular in the past several years. It's something that I've been studying very deeply for over the last decade. I was fortunate enough to have a chef that introduced me to slow food. And it's just something I'm very passionate about. And I really hope that I get your gears turning and start creating and generating some new questions for it. So like we said, keep notes. We are gonna have some slides for y'all. Show you what we're going to go over in each section. Just keep notes, and we're going to try and get to all those questions at the end. I also have some recipes and other guidelines for you. But as always, I am more than happy to answer any questions. If you ever want to reach out to me, my information is going to be posted as well. So you can reach out to me on Facebook, email, or Instagram. And again, more than happy to help with anything that I possibly can. So a few things that we're going to touch upon are going to be, so our class, yes, is called Peel to Pit and the End of the World. You see my information is right there. And I honestly use this photo because it's a great example of how much waste we produce when we're just juicing. Because people just throw that out. And there's so many things that you could do with those bits right there that's more than just making like a jam, a jelly, or whatnot. So if we want to go to the next slide, there we go. So we're going to go over practicing safety because we always want to make sure that we follow our local food laws. We want to help each other grow. We want to help each other learn. And then we're going to go over some techniques and different organizations and documentaries that I really geek out on. So yeah, let's, I guess, dive into it. How's that sound?
Oh, it sounds good to me. I think it sounds great to everybody else, too.
All right, so I guess we can go to the next slide. So we're going to start with our commonly used fruits and how to keep it local. So commonly used fruits, we always have those heavy hitters, is what I like to call them. You have your lemon, your lime, orange, and grapefruit, and those do not naturally grow all over the world, and they're not sustainable year round. So it's kind of really, it's hard when you're working at a restaurant that uses fresh juice to be sustainable while using these things, because you're going to have a carbon footprint, you're going to have waste, you're going to have things that aren't seasonal, you're going to, there's a lot of things that you got to think about when it comes to it. That's why it's so important to learn how to kind of break things down a little bit more. So we're going to start talking about one of my favorite organizations, which is Slow Food. If we can go to the next slide, please. So Slow Food. Slow Food is an organization that started in Italy in 1986, and it was in protest to opening up a McDonald's at the base of the Spanish Steps. Obviously, they lost because there's a McDonald's there. I've been to it. There.
They got a lot of money, y'all.
But what slow food actually means is using what is locally grown during its harvest season. So the like meat, their fruit, the vegetables, everything that you have within a certain radius. And that little snail right there is their actual logo. It is a worldwide organization. So it's not just like a little, you know, a little like bump. It's big. And there's usually a chapter in most major cities. So reaching out to them and seeing what they have to offer is really cool, because they have a lot of stuff on their website and a lot of links to help guide you in different directions and help educate you on progressing and learning about your seasonality of food and things of that nature. The other thing that we really need to focus on is where you're located, the seasonality of your fruits, the seasonality of your produce, because there are some things that people don't think about using that are really cool. One of the things that I've used has been the bottom bits of your green onion, and I made a little cordial out of that, and I used that for like a highball, and it was fantastic. It was like a really bougie Gibson. It was fantastic. But like learning your growing season, learning what you have, learning what you have access to, and exploring outside of the fruits. And how we can minimize that carbon footprint that we are putting out there because of our need for those heavy hitting fruits, the lemons, the limes, the oranges, the grapefruits. And how we can help support our local economy with our CSAs or our community supported agriculture, which they are phenomenal, and they're your mom and pop farmers, and they don't use GMOs. They don't splice anything really. They make it so that way if you wanted to regrow from their seeds, you can, which is really, really awesome, and it's really important. Um, so that's just kind of the tip of what we're going to be going into today.
Would you also say that the whole import situation too is obviously not sustainable? So things that you can't get locally, they have to be imported, and you're burning fossil fuels and that whole situation. So that's something that we're trying to get away from.
Right. So that's the carbon footprint that we want to try and reduce.
Mm-hmm.
So using exotic fruits that you wouldn't have, like being in the Midwest and having fresh
Passion fruit.
delivered, or passion fruit. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, it's really awesome, and yes, it's very delicious, but there's different companies that will supply it out of excess, or what they call ugly fruit, because it's not restaurant or grocery store ready. Like, it's not pretty enough for commercial or for public use.
Yeah.
So utilizing stuff like that does help the carbon footprint because that's already being shipped to us, but at the end it's just being thrown back in the trash, which is going to be more waste.
Yeah, and the company that you guys can use for that is called Imperfect Produce, which is a good one that'll send you all the ugly fruits.
I use them. I just started using them. I'm getting my second delivery this week. I'm very excited.
Amazing.
I love them. Okay, so we
can go back to the slides. There we go.
So okay, so yeah. So now we've covered, about that carbon footprint, reaching out, doing things like that. Now we need to start talking a little bit more about deconstructing the fruit and the food safety. So when you have you gotta think about the fruit that you're getting that's being shipped over, that like the heavy hitters. I'm going to keep calling them the heavy hitters. Your orange, your lemon, your lime, your grapefruit. Those are the heavy hitters. Those are the ones that when you work at an establishment that uses fresh fruit juice, there's no way of getting around not leaving a carbon footprint. Talking with your neighbors and sharing and things like that help lessen it. But the more you actually break down these fruits and understand every part of it, the better it is, because you're leaving a little bit less of that footprint, because you're appreciating the full fruit. So you have your peel, you have your pulp, you have your juice, you have your seeds. My honest question is, how many people out there do you know that honestly zest all of their fruit before they juice it? Are you utilizing those oils? Are you utilizing everything that you can from it? And then there's always the difference between whether you're using an electric juicer or if you're using a hand juicer. An electric juicer does help you break down the bits so you can use a little bit more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a hand juicer is bad. So like hand juicing leaves you like everything that's full chunk, and you can use it for things like, I like to use it for things like limoncello or infusions afterwards. Like I said, I just like to extract the zest first. And one of the things that we do is we save our zest at Sobu. We save our zest, and we zest in the morning. We save it. We keep it fresh through the day with moist towels and refrigerate them. And we use those instead of garnishing for every drink, which also saves time. And at the end, that adds up. And after that, people kind of, you have the zest, and then you have the rest of it. So you have your different things that you can use. Sorry. So you have your zest, and then you have the rest of the fruit, and then you have your juice. And then the other thing that I always like to bring up is, obviously you're labeling and dating your fruit, your juice. You have to, that's
obviously. I mean,
that's a lot.
Not always obvious to some people. Depends on what bar you're going into, right?
Always label and date. Always label and date. But when you're juicing, you keep track of your juice. Keep track of the juice. Like, create that spreadsheet. Create that spreadsheet and track how much juice that you're actually using. That way, at the end of the day, you can see how much you're actually wasting. Every bar I've worked at has had a different timeline. Most of them have been 24 hours for their juice. Some have been 48. Some have been 72. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So keeping track of your juice, how much you're juicing, and then how to use your pith. People don't realize that you can actually use your pith for things other than composting or the white, chunky bitter part. Like, that has a great purpose. That I think I'm going to touch upon a little bit later, because I don't want to get caught up.
You can definitely use that in a lot of different things. It's got a lot of flavor in it. You just have to balance it, wouldn't you say?
Yes. I mean, jams, your jellies, you have all the different preserves. But I have one main thing that I like to use it for that people don't think of that is vegan, very vegan friendly, which is very fun. Same thing with the pulp. Like you have your pulp. Like after you juice, you have like this big handful of, squishy citrus grains.
Yeah.
And and it's most people, and I'm guilty of it myself. I just throw it in the trash or in the compost, or I don't think about what I can do with it. I don't think about all the different parts, like all the different things that I make at home that I'm like, darn, I really wish I had some fresh lemon pulp or some fresh grapefruit zest or some fresh. So this is what I'm saying. Generating those ideas of why do we do the things that we do and why we do it. And then I like to go into, saving your seeds. Saving your seeds is a really cool thing to do. There's different companies out there called seed savers. I think they're in like mid-America. They're a cool company. I can't remember exactly where, but I know they're there. I know they exist. We have, and when you use local farmers and use your CSAs, you can save your seeds. Like I was saying, you can save your seeds and actually use those to regrow or do other fun things with. With GMOs, though, you can't, because they have their seeds so genetically modified that they have a protection against their fruit where you're not able to regrow it, and it's part of a whole thing of like biopiracy, and it's just that's a whole nother topic.
That's it. That is so upsetting to me. Just to hear you say that is probably one of the most upsetting things I've heard in a long time. It's like you literally capitalized on a specific type of fruit that is meant for everybody, and you cannot regrow from that type of genetically modified fruit. I think that's so awful.
Yeah, it's
moving on.
The earth, like you said, the earth is the bank. We need to be able to give back to it just like it gives to us. And if you have modified seeds, you can't give back.
Well, and that's the whole point, is just ensuring that these plants, whether it's citrus or agave or whatever, does not die out because of overproduction, which is exactly as what's happening as our earth gets more and more populated. We're just taking more and more. So it's like there has to be some level of responsibility.
Oh, and there's so many fruits. There's so many fruits and vegetables that are going extinct because of things like biopiracy and with the GMOs and everything. It's just it's terrible. And then
we can go back to the slide.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm like the other thing is that it's really exciting, and it does make me happy at the same time. On a lighter note, people have been reaching out and getting more involved with sustainability and anti-waste, and I love that. But we also need to look at the safety of our food. So not every single part of what we consume is safe. And my I should say three main examples are a lot of fruit, you can't actually use the seeds because they do have traces of cyanide after used in, and it's actually not that much. Like if you were to make a whole bunch of cherry pit butter, which I don't think anybody would, you could literally kill anybody. You can kill somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, we've watched, what's that show? Ozarks. She killed her husband that way. Like.
Yeah, well, and we had a discussion about this on the last.
Not a spoiler.
The last distance learning about Liz living in Costa Rica, and she had all these different seeds and different types of fruit, and people, were just eating them from. They were from other countries, and they were just eating it. And she's like, "No, this is poisonous." I mean, luckily, most of the things that we consume right now are there's not a whole lot of danger behind them. But that cherry pit thing, I don't think I knew that before you told me that. Obviously, I'm not going to eat a cherry pit, but
I think it's like 15 like milligrams or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact. I don't research how to make cyanide, so. But it's actually all. I promise I don't. It's actually almost all stone fruits. Their pits have a trace of that in it for you to be able to for it to be toxic. But it's not just the pits that you got to think about. Things like cantaloupe. I've seen this trend where people use cantaloupe skin as a garnish for their cocktails, and it looks super awesome. But the problem is that it's so porous that it's next to impossible to guarantee that has been thoroughly cleaned without having any trace of whatever that thing touched throughout its entire transit. So that's another one that So you gotta think about that. And the same thing with mango skin. So you might not be allergic to mangoes, but if you're allergic to poison oak or poison ivy, you could be allergic to mango skin because it has the same exact chemical compound as poison ivy and poison oak does. And you can break out into hives, and you never know how sensitive your guest is. So I just always say, don't risk them going home with, a giant rash on their face or anything like that.
Just to give everybody in the room a reminder, we are taking the questions at the end. So feel free to put them in and they will send them to me. But we will be taking the questions at the end so that we can stay on track because Amanda's got a lot of information here. So, but we'll definitely take your questions. So throw them in there, and then I just don't want you to think I'm ignoring you. All right, please continue.
All right, so now we're gonna go into the rabbit hole. So I have a few photos up here, and yes, believe it or not, I have made gummy bears. I have made cotton candy completely out of my scraps, like zero waste adult treats. That's it came out how it came out.
Yeah. You do the math.
And so we have, your jams, jellies, and preserves. But we can go to the next slide, please. So we look at this, and then we have our commonly made things. We have preserves. We have syrups. We have jams, jellies, marmalade, fruit butter, which is my favorite, by the way. We have shrubs, oleosacrums, and the key thing is what's the difference between all of them? So I mean, a syrup, like a simple syrup, a 1-to-1. Whether you make it by macerating your fruit overnight or covering your fruit with sugar and letting it sit to extract all the juices, and then splitting that with water to make it a 1-to-1 type of ratio. Your jams and your jellies and your marmalades, which basically the difference between them is one is just sugar and the fruit juice. One is fruit bits and sugar, and the other one is fruit bits, pectin, and sugar. Fruit butter is basically like marmalade, only there's no chunks left in it, and it's completely smooth. It melts on your toast like butter, but there's no butter in it. You dip your apples in it. It's really delicious. Shrubs, and I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. I'm just trying to get over the hump of more commonly used things before I start.
Just to clarify, will these recipes to make these things be available at the end, or can people contact you to figure out how to make these fruit butters and things like that?
Both.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I do have a list of some recipes at the end. They're kind of general recipes. Honestly, they're websites that I research and get my ideas off of, and then modify it to my own taste and my own flavor. Because another thing people don't generally think about is that produce tastes different in every single region of wherever you live. It's always going to taste different. So if I was to give you the exact perfect recipe that I have down here in Louisiana, it's not going to be your exact perfect recipe
in New York,
Wisconsin, or New York, or I don't know, anywhere,
Yeah. Well, we talked about this before. The limes in New York are about this big, and the limes in California are about this big. So the flavor is going to be completely different. So that makes sense.
Yeah, they're all very, but it's also it's so that's where I geek out real hard is like, because the soil and the water and the rock and everything that creates that fruit to make the flavor different is one thing that I'm not going to go into today.
Another time. Next week's course.
But so back to, so we have our shrubs. So shrubs are when you take a fruit syrup and vinegar. Your oleosacrum, which is literally just citrus sugar. It's we take our zest at the end of the day that we don't use from zesting for juicing in the morning, and we cover it with sugar and let it sit out overnight, and then we have oleosacrum. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I like to say, like I was saying, the difference between the James jellies and marmalade is when you put these things into cocktails and you shake them, you then double strain. And then, yes, you are extracting some of those flavors, most of those flavors, but then at the end, you're just double straining and you're throwing out all that fruit again. So it's really what do you want to do? Do you want to have that completely dissolve into your cocktail? Or do you want to double strain it and throw out that pulp, that pith, that whatever that you could potentially use in something else that could be completely consumed? Which is, like I said, why I kind of like fruit butter, because it kind of does pull all of that out, and then you play around. And generally, the shelf life for making preserves like this is usually about 5 to 6 months. It depends on the freshness of your fruit, and just making sure that you have everything sanitized properly. If you see funny looking bubbles in it, don't use it. Botulism is a thing. Don't give people the botch, please. Culinary school for a little while, we definitely all gave each other the botch a little bit. It's
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So this goes into fermentation. So everyone has been, like I said, going to this whole sustainability thing, the anti-waste, and then you take that one step further, and you have, like, do you want to do house fermented things? Because that's actually really fun. But you need to know your produce. You need to know what you're doing, because then you will give yourself the botch if you're doing it wrong. And it's, like I said, it's just not good. You have tepache, you have kombucha, you have sorrel, you have lacto fermentations. I'm a big fan of all of them. And just to cover, so tepache is using all the bits of the pineapple afterwards, usually not pineapple leaves. You let it sit and ferment, and you get this very delicious, kind of like a pineapple cider type of flavor. Kombucha is a fermented tea. Sorrel is a Caribbean drink that's made from fermented hibiscus. And lactose fermentation is, for lack of a better way of describing it, pickles. It's just salting, whereas one would be covered with sugar, another is covered with salt. So it depends on which type of flavor profile you are going for. Yeah. I know it's a very crude way of breaking that down, but again, going into the difference between preserving with sugar and preserving with salt is another deep dive.
Much like Montelobos, we do wild fermentation for our fermentative process, and tepache is pretty similar to that. You're just utilizing the microorganisms that are already left on the peels and in the environment to slowly ferment those sugars into alcohol. Similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And delicious.
Yeah, exactly. It's like one of my favorite things to make at home because you put it by a window and it just takes 3 days and you just have this beautiful, I use it in cocktails all the time. You have this beautiful, like sweet, but like effervescent pineapple flavor with whatever spices you're going to throw in there. It could be cinnamon, it could be clove, it could be black peppercorns, like whatever. It's like your own little witch's brew thing, which is so fun to me. I love it. I'm very, very Mexican. For sure.
Yeah, it's really good. And I do have a recipe for tepache down in the other slides later on.
Great.
I'm like, I don't. So, and then the other thing is that you got to ask yourself: is there a place for these things at your establishment, where you work? You know, asking your boss, your bar leader, your whoever. Is there a place for this? Like, can we make this at our bar? Can we make this at our restaurant? Is there a use for it? Because if there's not, see if, you know, always ask. Just always ask, because there's nothing wrong with asking. What's the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no.
Yeah.
So I say ask your neighbors, because sometimes you'll have neighbors that want that leftover bits. They want to make that produce. They enjoy it. They use it. They don't receive enough. Especially now with the state of how restaurants are in. Not to be a reminder, sorry. But they might not have enough fruit that they have left over to make their fermentations, or they will specifically have to juice and strip down fruit just to make these things. People do share. People have, you know, it's a community. It's about talking and communicating. So yeah, so just reaching out, and if your neighbors don't want it, your restaurant doesn't want it, I mean, you can always bring it home too. It's just another step, and this is all aside of whether or not you compost it. So just keep that in mind. Compost is always an option. This is just a way to figure out how to make things from byproduct to product.
And the next one that you have here is oleosaccharides. You can utilize other things other than fruit peels to make an oleosaccharin, correct?
So an oleosaccharin literally just means citrus sugar. So, which is why I say other, maceration. It's basically just covering your fruit with sugar and letting it sit and extract all of those juices.
Yeah.
And that's how I like to do it. I'm a very much a set it and forget it type of girl. I try to not be in the kitchen, and I've worked at several restaurants that didn't have a kitchen. So I've learned how to make these things without having heat application. So, using what you got.
Yeah.
And I also really, again, this is a personal preference. It's totally up to you. Some people prefer the speedy method with the heat. Like I said, I like the cold method. And again, later on, I have options for a heated method and a cold method for the shrub, which helps you understand the difference. Always remember, whenever you apply heat to something, it does actually change the flavor and the actual, I don't know what that word is. What's that word?
It's it's gonna change the flavor, and so you should definitely be experimenting a little bit for sure to see which works best.
Just everybody knows what this means, right? Profile.
It's this thing.
This thing, profile. But one thing that I've noticed is that it took me a few years to actually catch myself on this. Is you see all these beautiful syrups and shrubs and like all these different macerations, but what are you doing with the bits? Like, are you utilizing those bits? You have all this left. Like, if you make a strawberry shrub, what are you doing with the leftover strawberries? What are you doing with the leftover zest when you're done making the oleosaccharum?
You're gonna make a fruit butter.
Are you gonna see? Yeah, these are questions. What are you doing with it? but and sometimes usually it's equal parts is what I almost knocked this over. Equal parts is my general. So it's like 1 cup to 1 cup for fruit and whatnot. Sometimes it doesn't all break down the way that I would like it to. Same thing with like the salts and the lactofermentations. But this is when I kind of started thinking about when I was back in elementary school.
Yeah.
And this is when I started to get really geeky with it. And I started to take the leftover salts or some of the salt, the flavored salt waters or vinegars or from the fermentations, and I started taking the leftover sugars and some of the syrup liquid, and I started thinking about when I was in elementary school, and I was like, wait a minute, rock candy.
Yeah, we all did that. I feel like everyone who was in elementary school had to do something like that, especially in the US, because I did something like that when I was younger too, and we made rock candy from it and watched it grow.
Right, but why aren't we doing that now?
Well, good question. Why don't you tell us?
That's the whole thing. Well, like, why aren't we doing it now? Like, you can legit grow your own flavored salts and flavored sugars.
Yeah.
And you can use those as a mother base. And you can use it as mother bases. You can use it as, like hard candies, or what I call stained glass garnishes, which is basically like if you take if you take a little hard candy and you melt it out on a pastry sheet, that's when you do need heat for, and you get this kind of like clear or colored disc of sugar that you put over your drink. You can lay citrus peels in it. You can do all kinds of stuff and make really cool edible hard candy garnishes.
You can even take the sugar that you grow, crush it up, and then sell it.
That is another thing. Yeah. You can use it for rims. You can sell it. You can, like I said, you can use it for mother bases. And one thing that I did was you really have to picture me running around the entire restaurant. I figured out how to make cotton candy from the leftover strawberry bits from my strawberry shrub. Like, I literally took the strawberry bits that had been soaking in sugar. I dehydrated them. I pulverized them into a fine sugar, and I got a little cotton candy machine, and I made fresh dehydrated strawberry cotton candy, which really excited me because I was like, I just took this byproduct of something that I was trying to preserve and then made it into a final product, and now I have actually nothing left over other than the green tops of the strawberries, and that was all I had left over, which really cut down into that whole waste aspect, and the guests really enjoyed that because they also were laughing at me for running around with cotton candy like a child, but I'm not.
Cotton candy.
It's cotton candy. And then the thing I was saying that we can do with the pith, which is also the vegan friendly option, is you can actually make fresh pectin from your pith.
I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. I mean, everybody likes Jell-O, but when you move into veganism, you cannot have Jell-O. So I think that this is like a really cool way for you as a bar manager or a person, or a bartender, or whatever it may be, to be able to do this stuff even at home, just because you want to eat a damn gummy bear.
So that's what's really great about fruit. Pectin is from fruit. It's fruit pectin, which is why the jellies and the marmalades, they naturally get that kind of tacky feeling from it. The goopy spreadable part, that's the pectin. That's what solidifies it. That's what makes it you know, and that comes from things like the pits. So, you know, as I was saying before, when you break down your fruit and then you have that pith left over, you can take that pith, and before you compost it, you can extract the pectin from it. And once you extract that pectin, you can start applying to other things, where I went and made boozy gummy bears. So I took the juice that I had left over from the end of the day. I took my sugar that I had left over, because I had pulverized, I had taken out the zest from my Oleosacrum, and I had dehydrated them. I had used them for a garnish, but then I was getting tired of that being on every drink. You know, you gotta mix it up. So I pulverized it. So I made basically just citrus sugar, and I folded it into the juice. I folded it in with a little bit of oleo. I folded it in with some of the pectin and some alcohol, and made little gummy bears and jello shots. And that's like literally like a small treat that you can put in your hand. That's like, oh my gosh, this is actually every part of everything that I would have just thrown out this morning.
Well, and even if you don't want to, even if you're a bar that's just reusing the waste and you're not interested in selling something like that, you can use it as a garnish, or just like as an amuse-bouche in between your cocktail things, you know, and in between your drinks, just like something to just have that's fun and whimsical, you know. Sounds cool.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and then it's the same thing with fruit vinegar. You know, sometimes you overorder, or sometimes things don't go as quickly as you had planned, and that's when you start taking things like, think about your happy hour wine. Your happy hour wine doesn't necessarily always sell. So, what do you do with it?
Does when I'm there.
Me too. When you have the leftover wines, you make red wine vinegar, right? So if you have red wine vinegar that you're making, and then you have these like leftover fruits, you put those two together, you can make yourself a really dope like raspberry red wine vinegar. Same with banana peels. Banana peels is something that people don't think of using. Banana peels make a great flavoring for vinegar. Again, at the end of this, you can always compost or whatnot, but it's just taking that step. And
well, everyone's had that bottle of wine that's turned, and they're like, damn it, can't drink this anymore.
Make vinegar, make fruit vinegar, make something flavorful and bright. And then if you make that fruit vinegar, use that fruit vinegar to throw back into your shrub. And then you see like everything starts to just go into one another. And then, as I said, everyone is pretty much guilty of always either over order or you under order, especially when it comes to herbs. So one of the other things that I like to do is take my zest, and I'll take my herbs and I'll dehydrate them, but I'll make my own tea bags and make my own house teas for it, which is really fun, because then I get to play a little bit in herbalism and understand how different things affect your body differently. Like basil, for instance, is really great for migraines and neck tension and stress relief, just like lavender. So putting those things together into a little tea bag, and then putting it with a little mezcal and sipping on it is, you know,
a little Montelobos.
A little Montelobos.
Montelobos.
So, but that's a really great thing to do. It's just, again, like I said, making those little teas, because then if you have these little teas that you're making, then go back up to the top and start geeking out again. Like I said, kombucha.
Yeah.
So now you have these, you see how I'm starting to say, like, everything starts to fall back into each other. Pineapple leaves.
This is one that I've been curious about. I'm like, how do you use them other than just sticking it in a drink and having it poke you in the eye?
So one thing that I always do whenever I'm using fruit, or whenever I have an option to order something that I wouldn't normally order, is I research it. I research the the hell out of it and try and figure out what I can do with every single aspect of it. If more than, you know, 25% of it basically goes in the trash or the compost, I don't really see that as like a bonus, unless, it's something like, we're talking about with the ugly fruits and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I started researching what to do with pineapple leaves after I had made a bunch of tapache. We were using pineapple for something in the kitchen. So they were using pineapple in the kitchen, and I started taking the rinds and everything and making our little house tapache. And I researched the pineapple leaves, and I found that in I think it was northern Asia, they you clean the pineapple leaves, but you dehydrate them and grind them and make tea out of it. And it's really good for inflammation and like respiratory things and stuff like that. It's got a very, very like kind of grassy type of taste to it, but in a good way, not like you're out, mooing, like like a straight up good, like herbaceous,
Yeah.
grassy type of taste, which went really well with citrus and Montelobos and other things.
Well, so you could potentially do this really easily with these pineapple leaves and make your own tea bags to serve on your tea menu at your bar.
Correct. Yeah. So and that's one of the things that I like to look at. And then the other thing that I would look at is, most of us use paper menus, right? So you have all these paper menus and you change them frequently, or they get a little like tacky, or someone puts a cocktail on it because it's apparently
Yeah.
kosher. I like to take this. Now this is where we go back to the very beginning, saving those seeds. I like to take menus home and go back to kindergarten again and do paper mache type project. And I, flour, water, paper, seed pods. And it's really kind of fun because you can give those to guests and they can bring them home.
But the only way that would work, right, is if you aren't getting a GMO product from like Dole or whatever company that, has a monopoly on their specific fruit.
Essentially, yeah. So now with these GMOs, the seeds may grow into a plant, but it will never fruit. From my understanding. I don't want to speak for,
It seems right. That seems like,
But yeah, I mean, you could potentially get a bush or a tree or some sort of plant from it, but it won't be fruiting. And there's no guarantee on it. I'm going to apparently use the word fruiting like it's a real word.
What'd you call me? I'm just
but like taking your paper menus and breaking those down and making seed pods for guests. And that's like a really cool keepsake, because you can take your seeds from your strawberries. You can take your seeds from your whatever local fruit that you have that's not, obviously not like a mango seed, because that would be a really awkward pod to give them. But it's things like that. You look towards how to give it back. And when you have these seed pods, there's other organizations I'm gonna explain a little bit more later. But there's you have your local farms and neighbors and your friends and whatnot that you can plant. And like I said, it's giving back to the earth. Like, take one, plant three.
Yeah, you're gonna treat it like a bank account.
And then you also have, it's just composting and understanding what you can and can't compost. Like, composting meat isn't really a thing. You need to make sure that you're aerating compost. Proper compost has a very natural kind of sweet smell to it. It's not supposed to smell like
garbage.
Yeah, it's not supposed to smell like garbage.
Yeah.
I was just learning about this chef that wound up making an entire dish out of his composted citrus rinds. Like he composted it and realized it had this beautiful smell to it and decided to experiment on himself and ate it. And he was like, and now it's something that's on his menu. Like you can go really, I don't recommend that. I'm not saying do that at your restaurant. I'm not saying like, hey, here's my compost. But you know what you can and can't put in there.
Yeah.
And then you look at coffee grounds. I mean, coffee grounds and eggshells. But coffee grounds is something that's always thrown away. I don't really know anyone that saves those coffee grounds. You can compost coffee grounds. You can compost eggshells. But what you can also do with coffee grounds is you can make really awesome fruit butters with it because a lot of that caffeine is extracted from it. You can make brownies out of it. I actually have a really fantastic recipe that I got from a cookbook I just got for my birthday. That was
Happy birthday.
that was aquafaba and coffee ground brownies, which I know sounds really crazy, but
Sounds vegan.
It's like completely vegan
Yeah.
and using all of the scraps. Same thing with eggshells is, you know, when you have egg white cocktails on your menu or somebody wants a sour or, you know, they're trying to Ramos it up, like you have those eggshells. And it's the same thing with the egg yolks. Honestly, egg yolks, I am not the biggest fan of flips, but I love cured egg yolks. Cured egg yolks, literally just letting it sit there for like a week, covered in salt. Oh God, it's so good. But
I have a question for you that I was curious about. Are you also able to use these ground up eggshells or coffee grounds for like cleaning things, for scrubbing?
that I'm
Maybe
not.
maybe you could take them home and put them into a face wash or something for an exfoliant.
Oh,
I know I went off the cuff here.
no, coffee grounds you can use for like face masks and exfoliants because it does provide, uh, you know, good stuff for your skin.
Yeah.
But eggshells, I'm not so sure about. I do know that if you save your eggshells and you're not just putting it in the compost, you save your eggshells and you boil it and then bake it and you grind it into a fine powder. It produces this pure calcium powder, which you can put into your breakfast smoothies or you sprinkle in your oatmeal, just to give you that added vitamin.
Yeah, and then you don't have to buy those expensive pills for us old people.
Yeah, well, I have some over here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, how many of us really actually take care of our bodies and ourselves? And who would like eggshells? I'm like, duh, I throw those out all the time. I could be making calcium powder and keep my bones strong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can move to the next slide.
I think we can move to the next slide. Okay, so how to reach out and how to get back. So now I have these two photos in here, which are things that I absolutely love. There are two programs, well, really a few programs that I really love, but these two are ones people aren't as familiar with. So the first photo that you see on the left side is going to be a farm to school program. Now this is where you can actually use your compost and those seed pods and donate them. This is worldwide. This isn't like a unique anything to like any specific city, but there are certain areas, and it's the National Farm to School Network is the major website that I have found to help direct you. But what farm to school programs do is they teach children how to be sustainable and self-sufficient, self-reliant. And they teach them how to, plant, grow, harvest, do all that stuff. Some of the programs are located off school premises. Some of them are located on school premises. So when you look at certain schools that have like pretty shrubbery versus ones that have tomatoes surrounding it. And what's really cool about the ones that are on the school premise, which I really highly promote, are a lot of the time they'll take that food that the kids harvest and bring it into the cafeteria and use that to feed the children for lunch.
Oh, that
Which,
is just beautiful.
right?
It's just
Uh,
beautiful.
so, and then again, like I said, that's where the composting and saving your seeds comes in handy, because those are the type of programs that you can reach out to and donate to. Again, same with the slow food and reaching out to the slow food community. They're always posting something. And slow food, for the slow food community, isn't just produce. It's also it's all farming. It's all anything you could put on your plate. So they even have it broken down to fish, meat, vegetables, everything. And then, your CSAs, your community supported agriculture, uh, you know, again, seeing if they want to take your compost or your seeds. I can't guarantee that everyone's going to be like, yes, give me all your compost, because it's going to be a lot with the amount of restaurants that are out there. But it never
Yeah.
hurts to ask. The same thing with
Yeah.
your neighbors. Um, and then you look at the picture on the right. Um, and this is one thing that I love, and I dream of owning one. I don't know if you can really see it that well in this photo, but that is from a company that's called Earthships, which was founded, can't remember the year, so I'm not going to pretend. So Earthships is a company, housing that's completely built by recycled materials. So
Oh,
whether it be glass bottles, like we use all the time at our bars, or tires, or anything like that, is completely recycled. So that entire side, the whole left side of that, actually not the whole left side, but the majority of that whole house, that structure that you see, is made from used bottles.
yeah.
Which
It's the bottom of them, right?
I believe it's
They
the
just stack them up and put cement between them, no?
I don't think it's some. It's not necessarily cement. It's something a little bit more economic, like
Yeah.
clay and mud and stuff like that.
Right. So cool.
Um, the other thing that I've done is reach out to art schools. Obviously, a lot of us use it for cheaters, or we cut it in half, make our own glassware. Um, but and then there's different grinding stations. And grinding stations are places where you can go and deposit your bottle, and they'll use those. Here in New Orleans, we have some of them that use it to refill our potholes. And if you've ever been in our city, that's pretty much what our streets are, just potholes. So we have all these grinding stations that will donate that back to filling potholes. Some of them are made to for sandbags for flooding and things like that. There's been other companies that have taken the glass for the grinding stations and broken them down into melting into their own plates that they would reuse for their restaurant. So you would have all these different glass bottles that were then became plates to reserve food back on, becoming again full circle. And then my favorite has been, finally, is the food scrap recycling farms, which there's a few different companies, and one of them is located in Vegas, and that's a family run. I should say Nevada. That's a family run operation. And then there's another one that's located in Massachusetts. That's like a huge one. So those are the two most notable ones that I've really seen. But what they do is they take all the raw vegetation from restaurants that aren't used for plates, like the scraps that they're not, instead of composting it or throwing it in the trash or whatnot, they're sending it back to these farms and using it for energy resources, because they're using the gas to power, for power, and or they're using it to cook down and and feed the farm animals. And once so basically, like, they're taking the scraps. The one in Vegas, like, they take the scraps from the casinos and whatnot, cook it down, feed it to the pigs. Pigs then go and feed us gamblers and party players. And then so there's those different kinds of programs that I don't know are very well known. that help recycle. And for instance, when I was doing more research about the food scrap recycling farms, is that those have been legal almost nationwide, but have been legal in they've been legal for a long time. Certain areas have certain restrictions, but generally it's something that can be pursued more so. And like I said, again, like I know this is a lot of information, but this is all just to generate questions and ideas and how to kind of pursue it and ask why we do what we do. What's the last slide? What's the next slide?
Yeah, and then I think it's just the information after that with all the references, recipes, and links.
So I have so all the organizations. I have Slow Food, Farm to School. I have Earthship Global on there. Local Harvest, which is a national link to all the different CSAs that have signed up. Obviously, there's going to be more CSAs that aren't part of that website, but it's a good one. So, and of course, Trash Tiki, which always has great things. Some documentaries. I put some newer documentaries up there. Just, there's so many documentaries about this. Honestly, I spend a lot of my time with TED Talks and all these things that sometimes even my boyfriend's just like, what is wrong with you? But I put up a few of my books. Silo I learned about last year during the anti-waste seminar, and I read it, and I thought it was fantastic, and I wanted to put that back out there for y'all to geek out on, and for those who wanted to pursue fermentation. I have that book there as well. And then if we go to the next slide, it's again the recipes: fruit butter, pectin, tapache, how to grow salt and sugar, hard candy. And I apologize because some of them, I think one of them is like little science for little hands. It's like, kids' websites, but really like using stuff that we used to do when we were kids is a lot of how I started to play and ended up again with cotton candy made from the leftovers of a shrub.
Mm-hmm. I just really believe that, like I said in the beginning, and it's basically kind of what we've been talking about, is the level of responsibility that we have as people in the hospitality industry to promote this type of sustainability behind the bar. And, oftentimes consumers come into a bar in a restaurant and you're the last 3 feet before they try a new spirit or try a new dish or try a new cocktail. So why can't we also impart this really amazing information onto them so that then they go home and utilize this kind of sustainability at home? Whatever you can do to kind of build it up. I mean, we should all be doing at least some level of this right now, given the current state.
I always offer, to give out my recipes to my guests. I have the final slide is actually, can we go to the next slide? So yeah, seed paper, fruit vinegar. So like just recipes. I put composting 101 up there just so that way it's an easy link. And then the final slide should be the next one.
And there she is.
And there's my information. Honestly, I am open to answer any questions. Reach out whenever. Follow me on Instagram. I'm an open book. I honestly don't believe that these things are my property. These are things that I want to share to try and help build a better future for all of us. There are just so many things that we can do. One of the things that I do at the bar is I always like to have some of my sustainability practices laid up on the back bar, and people are always asking me questions about it. And they come back for more, and they send me messages. And still to this day, it's been 10 years, and I still have the same people emailing me, asking me, well, what do I do with this? And
see, that's what I mean. Yeah. You're just using you're using your platform to push this information that's extremely important. I think that's great. Just so everyone else is aware, there's links to all of these links that we just shared, because it was quite a bit of information to write down. So it should be in the comments. But Amanda, there is one question. I got one question. You were extremely thorough, so we have one. You were very thorough. Which seeds have you had the most success regrowing? So anything in particular that was pretty straightforward and easy to regrow?
Honestly, cucumbers, tomatoes, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. Those have been the easiest. I haven't tried enough with the citrus, mainly because I don't have placement for it.
Yeah, it depends on where you live too, with citrus for sure. You wouldn't be growing limes and lemons in Maine.
But I do know of people that I have given these to that were of citrus that have been able to regrow with citrus. But generally the berries have been the easiest to regrow. And then there's also regrowing from the stumps. So regrowing the pineapple from the pineapple top. I've regrown my romaine lettuce. I've regrown my celery from the stumps of it and letting it sit. I don't know why, but I feel miserably at regrowing avocados every time. But I've had a lot more success with the others. So there's always, just that rotation and build.
Well, listen, I think that this was a very good bit of information. And again, as I said, we got to be responsible, y'all. We need to keep the earth around. And not only the earth, us.
Yeah, right.
But as I said, if you have any questions further from here, Amanda's information is connected into that link that was put into the thread. It's also up on the screen here. So if something pops into your head, please send her a message. She is happy to share all this information because it is so important. So Amanda, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cory, and thank you, Lopez. Thank you, Campari. Thank you, everyone. I'm so stoked that y'all chose me to geek out with you today.
Oh, I mean, we just love geeks. Well, thank you guys again for coming. We appreciate you. We appreciate your responsibility and your sustainability practices that you're already doing. And tune in next time, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye, y'all.